Sana'a is a city under siege. 6 months of bombing. Airstrikes day in, day out. The campaign is led by Saudi Arabia and backed by the West.
قتلونا خربوا بيوتنا ما عبش ما ناكل جاوعي بيوت مخربات.
On Sana'a's main shopping street, a missile has gone straight through the roof of a residential block. 3 people were killed here, including a mother and a young daughter. No neighbourhood is safe.
What happened? Nothing happened. Just people that are sleeping in peace, they get pumping.
I hear screaming, too much screaming. You can see here, around here, all the building is full of families. Yeah. There is not empty, it's full of families.
The aim of the Saudi-led coalition is to oust Iranian-backed Houthi rebels from the capital. Saudi Arabia has also imposed a blockade by land and sea. Well, this happened just a couple of hours ago, and now everyone seems to be moving off elsewhere. There's talk of another strike in another part of town. We can hear it going on as we speak. This city is under constant bombardment now. Towards the Saudi border, the bombing is even more intense. We've heard reports of deliberate attacks on civilians, attacks that could amount to war crimes. Ahmed El-Baina, 13 years old, worked at a water bottling plant. 10 days ago, he had dinner as usual with his parents and his brother Mohammed. Then the 2 brothers set off for the night shift. Can you tell me what happened? We meet the manager. The factory was hit by an airstrike, he tells me. It was 3:40 in the morning. The pictures that follow are disturbing. In the gruesome aftermath, they filmed as they searched for bodies. Right. Oh my God, you can see it. You can see it's still smoking here. The workers came out like pieces of coal, they say. Okay.
ونزلنا ندور بعضهم بالشاول وحصلنا منهم بعضهم قطع وبعض نص منه. يعني خلاص روح كله ما عاد فيه ولا شيء. لا عوادم ولا مصنع. كامل. يعني ما ذنب العمال. يعني العمال حصلناهم يعني في المكاين. خلاص لاصق في المكاين ما في.
The owner showed us a list of who was working that night. More than half were killed, 13 in total, including Ahmed and his brother. The Saudis say this was a weapons factory and a training camp for African mercenaries. We saw absolutely no evidence of that. One of the workers picks up a plastic bottle. Is this a missile, he asks. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? That was an airstrike. Quite distant, but we could definitely hear the thud coming from over that way. All of this is happening not only with the full support of the international community and the stamp of approval of the United Nations Security Council, but also with the enthusiastic support of Britain and of the United States, who not only are continuing to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia even as they bomb, but also have liaison officers inside the coalition high command. The bottling plant is not the only example. The Saudis denied it was a coalition missile that struck Sana'a's old city, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Whatever it was that destroyed these historic buildings, we do know what military hardware the Saudi Air Force is using over Yemen, mainly American-made F-15s and British-made Tornadoes and Typhoons, dropping bombs supplied by the US and the UK.
It's difficult to argue that a weapon being sold to Saudi Arabia would not in some way be used in Yemen, or if it's not used in Yemen, it enables the country to use other weapons in Yemen. So we clearly know that's happening. There is evidence of personnel support again in terms of supporting the Air Force and the Army in its efforts here.
Perhaps as devastating as the bombing is the blockade of seaports in particular. On a ward in a hospital in Sana'a, we meet Reem Abbas and her daughter Rania. She's 4 years old and acutely malnourished due to complications from meningitis. In a country that imports 90% of goods, including medicines, chronic shortages have now reached crisis proportions.
من سبب لو بعد الوضع هذا يعني عدم كل حاجة حتى الكهرب في المستشفى يعني إذا سبحان الله الماطور وقع في حاجة ولا حاجة وفي بالعناية وفي كذا يموتوا يروحوا فيها سبحان الله.
2 days after we filmed that interview, the hospital closed. Too many airstrikes, too few resources. The scale of the crisis is huge. On top of the blockade and the airstrikes, there's been months of fierce fighting between the two sides. 1.5 million people have fled their homes, seeking shelter in makeshift camps. Half the population of Yemen doesn't know where the next meal will come from. Khadija Ahmad is forced to pick the leaves off thorn bushes to feed her 4 children. You grind it up with water? It's better than starving to death, she says. The family fled here because of the airstrikes further north, but nowhere is safe. In July, a missile landed near their tent. Khadija, 4 months pregnant, miscarried. But she says she fears hunger more than bombs.
والله كل الجوع أسوأ من ضربتك طائرة ما تدرين ابنك يموت مول ولا انت من أنا أحسب لابني اللي ورايا ما بيش نفسي بابني اللي ورايا أقول كيف يكون حين أنا الطائرة تعقرني وهو كيف يقع منه بعدي عندنا تكملنا بالمرة كلنا سوا ولا يبقى منه.
This is a war in which even refugee camps are no refuge. There's a game the children play here. It's called 1, 2, 3 Airstrike. It's accompanied by squeals of nervous laughter. But it's deadly serious. Deliberately targeting civilians in refugee camps or elsewhere is a war crime. Many of these people were already living in camps, fleeing earlier wars, and now they're being hit again. In places like Harad and Saada, towns near the Saudi border, which have been heavily bombed. Yeah, but I'm just surrounded here by people coming up one after the other, telling me that their family, their relatives, their children were killed in Saudi airstrikes. There seems to be no end to the witnesses here. Since the conflict started, more than 2,000 civilians have been killed by both sides. Houthi soldiers, some of them no more than teenagers, are accused of firing heavy weapons in built-up areas. But it is the Saudis and their coalition partners who have overwhelming force in the skies.
Schools and hospitals and markets and enterprises and factories should not be stricken, should not be shelled. You know, even in warfare there are certain rules to abide with, and they are being violated in this conflict.
A week after the airstrike on the bottling plant, we went to meet the parents of Ahmed and his brother Mohammed. Assalamu alaikum, Gabriel. Assalamu alaikum. Mohammed was the family breadwinner. Ahmed, a typical 13-year-old, always on his bike. Ibrahim and Khalija Al-Baina describe hearing the blast at the bottling plant, how they searched through the rubble for the bodies of their sons, how they gathered their severed limbs together in a plastic bag.
ظلموني من ولادي والله ظلموني من أولادنا سنين ماتوا عليه
بعدين راح على اثنين محمد وأحمد سواء ساعة واحدة في يوم واحد.
Whoever did this to us, the father said, may God repay them. In the past few days, the bombing has intensified. In Sana'a, there's talk of an impending advance on the city. This war is part of the wider struggle for power between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Not everyone here supports the Houthis, but with every airstrike, with every civilian death, resistance to the Saudis and their allies is growing.